The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.
Say what's on my mind at any given time of day, cause I'm a renegade. Never been afraid to holler about anything.
Welcome in to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
And yes, today is our MLB preview show. We're going to be talking pretty much all about baseball. At the end of the show, we'll talk about the Bulls and the Cavs and some of that stuff going on tonight, but and also probably talk about the Final Four. But we're going to start off talking about the Cubs, especially as their roster is finalized. They have a couple exhibition games in Houston. One of them's tonight, and they get ready for the opening night, I should say, Sunday night in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's getting exciting. Spring training's finally wrapping up. The exhibition tonight against Houston, and soon they'll begin their quest to defend their title.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time, of course, because they're going in as the World Series champs, and that's always really exciting, especially how the Game 7 ended. I mean, it was probably the craziest game ever, probably one of the best Game 7s ever as well, so it was great.
Imagine, though, if they had lost that game. I kind of wonder if Cub fans would be looking as forward to the season as they are now, thinking that they could be defending their title, because you think if they would have lost that kind of heartbreaker,
yeah,
I think some fans would actually have a tough time, just like thinking, how are they supposed to get back after that?
Right. I think because it would have been so close, it would have been an extra innings loss, and the Cubs would have lost on a walk-off. So that would have been, it would have made you feel really bad. The only positive that would have come out of that is you're like, well, look at how close we got. We're probably going to win this year in 2017. But we don't have to worry about that, luckily, and now we have a chance to repeat. If the Cubs do that, they'll be the first since the Yankees of 98, 99, and 2000 to do that. So that'll be very exciting if it happens. Kind of means that we might have a little dynasty on our hands, which doesn't happen too often in baseball.
Right, and as I believe I've said this one before, it's kind of funny. The Bulls dynasty started with a conference finals loss to the Pistons. Then they go and win 6 and 8 years.
Yep.
The Blackhawks started a conference final loss to the Red Wings. Then they go and proceed to win 3 and 6 years.
Right.
And the Cubs, they had the NL championship loss to the Mets, and then they won the World Series the next year. So if history keeps repeating itself, we may.
And then you got your one-and-dones with the White Sox and Bears. So you got your 05 and your 1985, and that's it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about them because they're in different places right now. But, all right, so let's talk about the Cubs now as they finalize their roster. It looks like Matt Caesar and Tommy LaStella both made the roster, and that's because a player on the DL.
Yeah, left-hander Brian Dunsing.
Right.
Which, as Theo said, he hasn't really pitched at all. He's made 2 or 3 appearances because he was injured.
Yep.
So, his arm's probably not up to strength anyways. He probably could have made the argument he could have gone to extended spring training, too, to try to get his arm speed back up. Yeah, and really it didn't sound like he was ready to make the roster anyways. This is good because then, at some point, Caesar might have to be traded if they decide they want to keep LaStella over him. Or, you never really know. Maybe Koji Uehara, his arm finally falls down, and they might have to designate him for assignment. He's 41 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know how good.
I did not realize he was as old as he was.
See, I don't know how long you can expect him to keep staying good because he's been good for a long time. And I think at some point a massive decline might happen. And, at some point maybe he has to be DFA'd.
Yeah, it's possible.
Hopefully not, though. Hopefully not.
I was glad that Matt Caesar made the roster because, it was a little shaky if he would or wouldn't. And, he hit pretty well last year. I think he hit .259 last season, and he was really good early on.
He was really good as a pinch hitter.
Yeah, he was really good as a pinch hitter. He had more than 10 home runs, didn't he? I believe he did. He probably had like 11 or 12, something like that. He did pretty well.
Yeah, I know he did really. I don't know if he started enough games to hit 10 home runs.
I remember he hit a grand slam earlier in the season against the Braves. That was his highlight.
Yeah, I think he had a multi-home run game this past season.
He probably did. I'm telling you, I think he got to double digits in home runs.
I'll get on that,
but it doesn't matter. But and Tommy La Stella, of course, is the left-handed bat. So I don't know if the time comes around trade deadline, if they're going to trade one or the other, if they would rather keep Matt Caesar, who's probably done a little more with the Cubs than Tommy La Stella has done, but Tommy La Stella is a left-handed bat, and he never have too many of those.
He doesn't strike out. He makes contact. He's good at hitting fastballs. He can hit left-handed pitching. I think if worst comes to worst, they would just send La Stella down again because he has options.
I wonder
hopefully he reports.
Yeah, hopefully he reports this time instead of taking 2 weeks off before doing that.
Caesar hit 5 home runs last year.
Oh, jeez. He only hit 5 home runs.
He had 24 RBIs, and that's a lot for a reserve.
Okay, so he had 5 home runs. I was way off.
That's pretty good for a reserve.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty good. He was a good defender. He still is, and... Yeah, I just think about some of the moves that the Cubs made in the offseason. How much of a win was that trade that we made with the Royals, Jorge Soler for Wade Davis? Well, Soler is starting the season on the DL.
Yeah, we'll find out. Wade Davis had an ERA above 19 this spring.
Yeah, not a good spring, but he is coming off of an injury.
In the long run, it could end up being the Royals that win that trade, except for the win now mode. Cubs, if he helps them make another deep playoff run, then yes, it's just with Soler that's these lower body injuries that are really keeping him from reaching his potential because he's not able to get a groove at the plate, and we've seen what he can do when he's locked in.
Yeah, when he's locked in and when the weather's not so cold, he hits pretty well. I think he also hit the scoreboard on a home run last year, so he has just as much power as any of the other guys on the Cubs did, but the problem was the strikeouts. The problem was swinging at horrible pitches a lot of times. And
staying healthy.
Not the best defender. Had a good arm, but not the best defender. So, all those things kind of factored in.
Yeah, it's unfortunate it didn't work out for him here. Although someone did have to get moved.
Yeah.
Someone had to be moved this offseason because he had Schwarber coming back. Almora, they view him as ready. You got Jason Hayward back. They signed John Jay. So someone was going to have to go. And plus, Zobrist and Bryant can both play the outfield.
Right. And I think we'll be seeing Zobrist in the outfield a lot more, whereas earlier on in the season, he was playing second primarily.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be playing very much second unless
with Baez.
Unless it's a day that Baez is getting off because he's literally turned himself into just a web gem machine.
And he really, turned it on in the playoffs, and he was, one of our most valuable players throughout that whole playoffs. No doubt about it. He was great defensively. Hit a couple. He hit that one home run against the Giants, and he also hit a home run in Game 7 of the World Series. So he's just pretty. Obviously he's a great player, and if he could just cut down on the strikeouts just a little bit, there's really no flaws.
Right, and maybe, as you said, cut down the strikeouts, maybe walk a little more. And the thing is, he's so good at tagging base runners. He's good at stealing bases. He's like a magician.
I know.
When he's sliding or tagging someone.
Yeah, and we saw in the World Baseball Classic how he already knew he had the tag down when Yadier Molina threw him the ball. He already looked up and pointed to him before he even applied the tag. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's a good player, and I remember thinking back in 2015 when there's all this Tyson Ross trade deadline stuff going on with the Cubs when they needed to acquire a starter. They ended up getting Dan Herron and giving up virtually nothing. I remember they were trying to trade Castro for Tyson Ross because the Padres wanted Baez, and I just remember thinking even though now it seems like you can just go ahead and move Baez, I just remember thinking in the long run that would be a mistake they would regret for a long time.
Yeah.
I think he's showing why.
I think Theo and Jed knew that. I think they were right on the trail there.
Because remember, there's a lot of people that were probably thinking, you can just go ahead and trade Baez because he struggled really badly in 2014. He got injured in 2015.
Yeah, I remember he got called up on my birthday in 2014, and then the following day, His first game in Colorado, he hit that like home run in extra innings, and I think the Cubs ended up winning that game. But
they did, yeah. He hit a home run.
But after that, I mean, he wasn't so good in 2014. But you're right. 2015 he started to get a little better, and then this last year, 2016, he got even better, and now it should just be going up and up. And he's been a pretty good player.
He has, and I mean, his versatility is great, and that's what Joe Madden loves: is guys that can play multiple positions.
Right.
And they have plenty of those guys. I mean, it's just a versatile, athletic, and young roster. They're fun to watch play. And you're kind of waiting for the day where they'd be having the problem of who's going to be the final guy making that roster, who's going to get cut.
Right.
It's a good problem to have.
Right. And another thing that we should talk about is the good spring that a lot of the young guys on the Cubs who aren't on the Major League roster but are in AAA and stuff, they had some good springs, like Chesney Young. He had a really good spring, and Ian Happ was outstanding.
John Andrioli was outstanding. Yeah. He played pretty well in the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, he did.
Showed some pretty good pop in his bat in spring training. There's a lot of young guys that really shined.
Yeah, and it's just like, obviously, of course, it's a good problem to have, all these good players, but then it's like, oh, well, we know that, two of these guys will probably be traded at some point for starting pitching or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one thing, though. Like, it's like they have all these young hitters, and they don't really have much pitching, and the thing is, there's not any of the other organizations have the influx of position players that can hit the ball well.
Right.
That the Cubs do. They've done such a phenomenal job developing their young position players, helping out with their plate discipline. It seems like almost all of them walk. It seems like all these guys walk now. They make good contact. I mean, they've done a really good job. It's just the pitching. And, they have some guys that have a lot of upside, like Dylan Cease. He can flamethrower, that has a massive break on his curveball.
Yeah, and that's why they did this, because you can always trade for starting pitching, especially if you really need it.
Right, and I think they would prefer to trade, for a more established pitcher rather than some more prospects.
Right.
And, at some point they're going to have to trade for a pitcher. I remember last year Ken Rosenthal made a tweet that said the Cubs were trying to acquire Drew Pomeranz, and then they were going to immediately flip him to a mystery team for a player that was not in trade discussions. It was not in any rumors.
I remember that, yeah.
They're going to trade Pomeranz in a package, and the only reason that didn't happen was because they didn't want to trade Baez, and that's who the Padres wanted, and the Cubs barked at that request.
Right. So the other thing that we can talk about, and we can talk about it in our next segment too, because we're running up against a break, is the fifth starter spot, goes to Anderson instead of Mike Montgomery.
Which I think is the right move, because, they're probably going to end up, Montgomery will spell Anderson a few times, or maybe they'll go the sixth man just to give some guys an extra day of rest anyways.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was definitely the right move. Mike Montgomery, he didn't have a great spring, like you said, but he was okay. And, Anderson, had some injuries here and there, for a couple of years, but they seem to like him, and I think the hope is that Chris Bosio can turn Brett Anderson into, into a good pitcher, sort of like what he did with Jake Arrieta.
Right. And Anderson showed what he could do a couple of years ago with the Dodgers. It's just he's the one guy that cannot stay healthy.
Yeah, so hopefully he can, and if not, that's why you have some of these young players in the minors. If you really need to, you could always trade for pitching. It's a lot easier to trade for pitching than it is to trade for hitting. We've sort of found that out, that's sort of what Theo and Jed like to do anyway, and it seems to work out. We won a World Series last year, and we do have a pretty solid staff as it is. So, there's a lot of good things going there. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue talking about the Cubs, and then we'll transition into our MLB previews. We'll preview how we see the season going as far as who's going to make the playoffs, who's going to win the wild cards, Rookie of the Year, and all that stuff. So you're listening to Sports Renegades on SportsTownChicago.com. The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.